Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm showcasing an Open Grade League team that I had amazing results with. I think I went either 21-4 or 20-5 across the 5 sets I played with it. A Discord member of mine tried it, and they went 21-4 as well. The team is Vigoroth, Shadow Feraligatr, and Shadow Gligar. 3 strong meta picks that all happen to beat Bastiodon. That on top of that are very flexible, so even if you don't have switch advantage, with energy, you can still potentially find ways to win. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and let's take a look at this team in action in the Open Grade League. I'm off to a tough start in the first match as I pick up a terrible lead Vigoroth into Deoxys. I send in Feraligatr expecting a Psycho Boost and dip, but the opponent doesn't throw their energy right away. This tells me that this is not a typical Deoxys team. The opponent doesn't have the normal types and dark types that are typically in the back. They end up Psycho Boosting eventually and switching out into a Trevenant, and Trevenant actually has a losing matchup versus Feraligatr. I bait with the Hydro Cannon, they call the bait, which is a nice play by them, but I can just shield, farm down, and take switch advantage. And switch advantage is amazing for me, because this way, I get to free up my Vigoroth from having to deal with the Deoxys, and Vigoroth probably has some nice play in the back. It's one of the reasons why I love leading Vigoroth. It's just so neutral against so many things that aren't counter users. They go for the Psycho Boost, and now they try and make it to another move, but they're unable to get there. In the back, it's their own Gligar, and even if they had switched out and not tried to make the other move, this game is just over, because I can land some damage with the Aerial Ace, send in the Vigoroth, and one move from Gligar does not KO a full health Vigoroth. They end up tanking the move, understanding that I can make 2. They're going to go for the dig. Dig will not be enough to KO. I can counter down a Gligar, and despite a tough lead, I'm able to take the game 1 win. More bad leads in the next match, Vigoroth into Trevenant. I save switch into Shadow Feraligatr, and I'm going to go for the Hydro Cannon instantly. This is resisted, so my opponent doesn't have to shield it, but it gets them into a range where I can even potentially knock out with a Body Slam later. So I've effectively neutralized their Trevenant for the entire game. They're going to send out Dugong. I am incredibly happy to see this here with a Gligar in the back, because Gligar really is not a big fan of ice. I go for the Hydro. This is where having something like Crunch would be very helpful, but of course I'm not running it. I do think Ice Beam is the better meta call overall at the moment. There is a lot of dragons out there. My opponent is going to double up, and in doing so, they're guaranteeing they get a move on the Vigoroth, and on top of that, they're also guaranteeing that I'm not going to get a lot of farm with the Vigoroth, so it's a pretty nice play from them. They go for the Icy Wind. The Icy Wind will actually give me 1 extra counter. When they send in the Trevenant, I'm just looking to switch. In comes the Gligar in the back. That's a blast from the past, a Galarian Stunfisk. I ended up looking it up after the battle because I was like, I haven't seen a Stunfisk in ages. And I believe it was Junkus who actually featured a team with the Galarian Stunfisk. Stunfisk was once an absolute meta titan, but thanks to this flying bat on the screen, it's a lot more difficult to run because Stunfisk is unfortunately just pretty helpless here. They can connect with a couple rock slides. I feel at this point, my only lose con in the game is by baiting. So I'm just not going to bait. I'm just going to keep full sending digs. My opponent is going to be able to fire off another rock slide and force the shield. I'm worried about a potential catch onto Trevenant, so I see a win con where I can avoid that just by switching into the Vigoroth. My opponent is now in an incredibly uncomfortable position with the Stunfisk. Stunfisk needs an Earthquake to KO the Vigoroth, and it needs a Rock Slide to KO the Gligar. So they have to try and farm, and in doing so, I just get way too much damage with the Vigoroth, and now they're in Aerial Ace range. So I'm just in a winning position. They can fire off the Earthquake, I can bring in the Gligar, fire off the Aerial Ace. This is going to be goodbye to the Stunfisk. And I can Aerial Ace the Trevenant, but honestly, I don't think it's going to survive the wing attacks. We wing attack down, and back-to-back bad leads, we're able to get wins. Vigoroth versus Charjabug. Vigoroth does win the one shield here, straight Body Slam. However, if it is the zeros, this is not a winning matchup. I'm not expecting my opponent to shield in this matchup, so I'm just going to go for the Rock Slide. I'm just trying to get as much damage as I possibly can in this matchup, because most Charjabugs do not shield. This one actually ends up shielding, which is a massive surprise to me. I'm just going to let this go. They have their Charjabug. It has a decent amount of energy. Unless they're running Crunch, they're going to have to pivot out here. They're actually staying in. This makes me think they have Crunch, or they have a very good check to my Gligar. And they're actually running Crunch. They get the defense drop, they bring in their own Gligar, and I switch out into Feraligatr. Feraligatr down even 1 turn to Gligar is a losing matchup in the 2s. However, I have a shield advantage. So I can shield, farm up 5 Shadow Claws, always CMP tying them here because I want to maximize my energy. The Hydro Cannon is able to knock out, and if they bring back in that Charjabug, I have some residual energy. The unfortunate thing for me is that these Volt Switches are doing a ton of damage. So I will go for the Hydro. They can throw an X-Scissor here if they want to. They decide against it. They're just going for as much Volt Switch damage as possible. I'm going to be able to pick up the knockout. And now I just have 2 Shield Gligar. In the back is a Quagsire. So they did have a Water type in the back for my Gligar. But up 2 shields, this is a very comfortable win for the Gligar. I can just commit the shield, make it to another dig. That's going to be good night to the Quagsire there. And this is just going to knock out at this point. So the opponent, they ended up having Crunch, which was a bit of a surprise, and got the debuff, but Feraligatr was able to put me in a terrific position mid-game, being up a shield. We've got a tough lead again in the next match, Vigoroth versus Shadow Dragonite. I intentionally put a lot of the tough leads towards the beginning of the video because I wanted to showcase that even if you do see tough leads, because tough leads will happen, there's definitely a lot of play with this team to fight back. I send in Gligar. I send in Gligar because normally the Feraligatr is a safe switch with this team, but bringing a Feraligatr into a Dragonite didn't feel amazing. I send in the Gligar, I'm able to get Azu, and Azu is a Pokemon that this team is technically triple weak to. However, in practice, I found that a lot of Azumarill's teams ended up being beatable, because it's a little bit of an overload strategy, where typically they have an Azu, that's a problem, but they can't beat your entire team with it, and Azu is probably, let's say, their only check to Gligar. So here I go for Slight Undercharge, I'm able to exit with energy. Dragonite has a move. I'm expecting them to try and cap tie me, so I'm just going to take my free Shadow Claw. Thank you very much, Dragonite. I will happily accept my free energy. So I commit the shield, and now I can overfarm, and Hydro is just going to knock out here. It's resisted, but it's a Shadow Dragonite. They're going to let it go. In the back is a Venusaur, and this comes down to a 50-50 call if I win the game. I'm going to go for the bait. I go for the bait. They call the bait. And that's how I'm going to lose one of the few games that I lost with this team. Terrible lead, terrible swap. I had the energy needed, but unfortunately, I bait. And they call the bait. Great bait call by my opponent, and that just wins them the game. Very unfortunate there. But even with a Nightmare lead and a Nightmare swap, it still came down to a 50-50 bait versus nuke call in an endgame. We see a better lead in the next match, Vigoroth versus Skeledirge. I'm going to throw one counter and safe switch into my Feraligatr. Opponent responds with a Ferrothorn of all things. Ferrothorn, I've actually seen an uptick in grass. Like, there's been a lot of Trevenants, obviously the Ferrothorn that's sitting on my screen here. I landed the Ice Beam, and this does allow me to flip this as the Feraligatr. Or, even if I can't flip it, I want to put it into a range where I can successfully counter down or wing attack down. So from here, this is easy counter down range for Vigoroth, so I'm just going to let it go. Fair enough, you can KO me. They Mirror Shot bait. Traitor, oh no. If they Mirror Shot again, I think I might live this. I actually live it on 1. They snipe with Annihilate, but I have Gligar. They were running a team that was triple weak to Gligar. I know that if I throw 6 swing attacks and an Aerial Ace, it should typically knock out here, and it does. They get KO'd. They have a Dirge in the back, and it's not going to win this game, and they will concede the match. Vigoroth into a Nidoqueen now. Nidoqueen, another pretty old Pokemon. If you see Nidoqueen lead, it's basically always going to be Nidoqueen plus Fighter plus Bastiodon, and Bastiodon is terrific news for me. A lot of Nidoqueens will often full send, so I shield, and I get baited with a Poison Fang. Shielding a Poison Fang is a horrific feeling. It's absolutely terrible, because now they can just Poison Fang my life away. This is truly, truly tragic. So they are going to be able to just pick up the knockout here with the Poison Fang, and I'm going to send in Gligar. But you may have noticed with the description of Nidoqueen Fighter Basti, you might say, well, Henry, they're triple weak to Gligar. Yes, they are. Their goal is to win the non-Gligar games. They aggressively switch into Annihilate, and it's the team. It's often Metacham, but this time it's Annihilate. The Aerial Ace will land. I know I can switch in the Feraligatr, and they're only going to be able to make a Night Slash. They can't make a Shadow Ball. So I can get an energy lead on the Feraligatr because I'm hard reading the Basti in the back. Now I have energy on my Feraligatr, and their Bastiodon cannot farm down from this health range. So the team that triple hard counters Bastiodon finally gets to see the Bastiodon. We get the team call right. I even get to throw on good timing there. It was a little risky. I should have just thrown it when I got it to guarantee the damage. But my Feraligatr can tank that move, get the farm down. I can bring in the Gligar, and Gligar's pacing is great, and Bastiodon's pacing is garbage. So I can commit the shield and just look to overfarm. There's an attempt at a catch. It's unsuccessful, and now I'm going to be able to take the win with the dig. That's a definite plus to this team. If your opponent has a Bastiodon anywhere, you're definitely at an advantage. We've got a mirror lead in the next match, Vigoroth versus Vigoroth. So this lead matchup depends a lot on who wins charge attack priority. Because obviously, if your opponent does, they're going to win switch, or if you do, you're going to win switch. I find that it's unlikely, at least in my games, that people are going to be shielding out of a Vigoroth mirror because you end up at 1 HP. Here, I lose charge attack priority, so I'm just going to actually go for farm on the Feraligatr because I get 3 Shadow Claw's energy head start, and Shadow Feraligatr's energy is insanely valuable. In comes Mandibuzz. I'm full sending the Ice Beam. I want guaranteed damage or a shield. They shield. That's a bit unfortunate. Here, I'm able to make a catch onto the Gligar, which is nice, because I'm expecting that they would Aerial Ace the Gator, expecting a shield. So, it does end up being a catch, because they Aerial Ace instead of Dark Pulsed. I will commit the shield here, and I get baited. Oh, my opponent gets their revenge. That is a little bit unfortunate. I'm going to be firing off the Aerial Ace. Unfortunately, this matchup is very awkward for Gligar. Opponent ends up throwing on alignment, which is very, very good for me. They Dark Pulse, but now I can double up. And back-to-back Aerial Aces will be enough to knock out the Mandibuzz. I've been able to do enough damage over the course of this battle that I can pick up the knockout. I end up throwing on alignment here. I want to guarantee the knockout or the final shield. They're just going to let that through. It's Trevenant, and I make a massive misplay. If I switch after 0 or 1 wing attacks, I win this game. But I switch after 2, and my slow switch means that this is going to be one of the few losses that I had with the team. I have back-to-back Hydros, but I lose charge attack priority. If I was faster on that switch, I outpace and I win the game. But unfortunately, a slow switch dooms me as I fall just short of a farm down and an Aerial Ace. Well, we've got same leads in the next match, so hopefully I can get a bit of redemption, because if I just switch sooner there, that's a win. That loss, the team didn't fail me there. That was entirely operator error, which is really frustrating. Here, I decided to go for the body slam instantly, and it turns out I win charge attack priority. This is great, as I'm going to be able to guarantee switch advantage in this matchup, or shield advantage. There's no way my opponent is ever going to be shielding this body slam here, because then they win switch, but they basically have no HP left on the Vigoroth, so they're just going to let it go and go for energy on Charjabug. But I have a great response available for Charjabug. In the back is Goodra. Goodra is uncomfortable. This feels like the safest bait in the world to me because they have to protect the Goodra. It's their only way of beating that Shadow Gligar. So, it feels like a very safe bait, and now I can send in the Shadow Feraligatr. Shadow Feraligatr has Ice Beam for this exact moment. However, they're low enough that a Shadow Hydro plus Farm is going to be enough to take them down, so I will just fire off the Hydro. The Hydro is going to be shielded. Opponent, again, with just perfect overfarm. I am going to commit the shield as to go for the Aqua Tail, and I'm intentionally throwing 2 Shadow Claws. This is going to allow me to survive a Volt Switch and make a Hydro first to Charjabug. So watch this. Charjabug is forced to throw the X-Scissor because of my very precise overfarm. And now I'm in an endgame that is just winning for Gligar, because all I need is 2 Aerial Aces and I can win the game. The only way that I lose is if I go for the dig. So the X-Scissor is going to connect. I can get the double up on Aerial Aces. My opponent is 1 Volt Switch shy of their next move, so I can throw 1 Wing Attack, fire off Aerial Ace number 2, and the Goodra in back was a little bit awkward, but the good news is the game will end in a victory. We've got another blast from the past in the next match, Vigoroth against Swampert. People trying a lot of the older meta picks. In comes a Drapion. Anytime I see a Drapion, and this might just be because I watched one Caleb Peng video where he was using Drapion as a safe switch, I always think that there's going to be Bastiodon in the back. And if there's Bastiodon in the back, then I'm in a terrific position. Here, the opponent is actually running Aqua Tail on the Drapion. So they're actually going to be able to CMP time me there, whereas if they were Crunch, I would have been able to outpace. I'm going to undercharge here. I want to put them in a range where I can Shadow Claw down, because this way, they can't bring in the Swampert, and they can't bring in the, oh, that's not a Bastiodon. That is a Charjabug. Well, you know what? Gligar is still great here. But I was really, really expecting the Bastiodon. My opponent is actually going to let me get to another Hydro Cannon. I throw on Alignment because I know that just getting this final shield is so valuable. Because if my Gligar is up 2 shields, I can't lose. And Charjabug, unless it's on Crunch, which we did see one on Crunch, can't damage Gligar. So I can bring in the Gligar. There's just no hope for my opponent at this point being down 2 shields, and they will concede the match. Hopping to the final match, Vigoroth versus Shadow Typhlosion. I am pretty good into this Pokemon as well. This matchup is very awkward for the Typhlosion as they're almost forced to Thunder Punch on Alignment. Otherwise, they're always playing catch-up when it comes to forcing shields. In comes Goodra. Goodra, again, a bit of an uncomfortable Pokemon for this team, but I still do have a little bit of Vigoroth. So I'm just going to stay in with the Vigoroth and get as much damage as I can. Firing off Body Slam number 1 and Body Slam number 2, and now I send in Gligar. Gligar tanks an Aqua Tail better than the Shadow Feraligatr tanks a Thunder Punch, so I'm more than happy to bring in the Gligar and just go for a farm down. This way as well, I have stored energy, so if the Typhlosion comes in, I can apply a lot of pressure to the Typhlosion. And the nice thing here is I'm 4 off and I live in Incinerate. So my opponent has to Thunder Punch after their next Incinerate, or I can make the Aerial Ace. And I'm just going to, I'll be honest, I'm just going to trust the Shadow Feraligatr at this point. Shadow Feraligatr is just incredibly strong. So I'm going to wait the timer in case I need to catch. I can send in the Feraligatr. In the back, it's Hakamo'o. Only way that I see losing this is with a bait. I baited a Venusaur earlier and they called it. So I full send the Ice Beam and Redemption in the final match. Down goes Hakamo'o. And that is a good game. All in all, I think that in general, this team is a good example of teams that can have success, even in a very unpredictable meta. Overall, this team, you could switch out several of the Pokemon and probably still have success. The goal is just to try and run strong, flexible picks. Vigoroth as a lead has insane neutral play into just about everything in the meta. Like even against a flying type like Gligar, you're still able to win the Zero Shield. It basically only hates Annihilate as its main meta counter. And versus Annihilate, you have a Shadow Claw user in Feraligatr and a Wing Attack user in Gligar in the back. So it is structured a little bit like an ABB team where you just have 2 things in the back that beat the main thing that your lead doesn't want to see. But you can potentially sub out different Pokemon. I've run Quagsire in the past instead of Feraligatr, but that overall, this kind of structure of just trying to run flexible mons and just outplay opponents can be a very, very strong one. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.